start with Good afternoon, everybody. It's wonderful to see all of you over here, particularly after lunch. The little worry was that everybody would have fallen asleep, but quite clearly, just looking at your faces, it seems you are quite enthused about this session, and I certainly am. Dr. Amitabh Kant is one of India's finest minds. He defines the word enthusiasm. He defines the willingness and the spirit to get things done. And he goes about his business of helping to draft policy to transform the growth of this country with a spirit and with a vigor that very few have actually seen. He is optimistic to the core. He's a born optimist. And he has ideas which extend not just for the immediate period of time, but we're looking at the 2030 and 2050 period by when Dr. Kant wants India to be the fastest growing economy in the world. He doesn't just want it, he fully expects India to be the fastest growing economy in the world. We'll begin our discussion in just a few moments, but before we do that, this is a book launch that we're doing over here on his new book, The Path Ahead, Transformative Ideas for India. And Professor Khanna, if you join us on the stage, sir, to unveil the book, it would be wonderful. Professor Tarun Khanna, come, sir. That's quite some background sound that we've got, huh? All right. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being over here. The Path Ahead, Transformative Ideas for India speaks about transforming our country, our India, to a place which is distinctly different from where we are at this stage. Dr. Amitabh Kant is the Niti Aayog chief. He is the author of the book, and he is somebody we'll be speaking to. I look forward to that. Parmeshwaran Iyer, the Secretary, Drinking Water and Sanitation, somebody who is absolutely at the center of the Swachh Bharat program. Naina Lal Kidwai needs absolutely no introduction, a banker, somebody who has accomplished so much in her life, and somebody who, like Dr. Amitabh Kant, is optimistic and wants to spread a message of positivity. Among the issues that Dr. Kant has spoken about, he wants, or he expects India to be the third largest economy by 2030, the fastest growing economy by 2050. He would point to India's GDP growth rate of 8.2% in 2018-2019 as being the first of many important steps towards achieving all of these goals. In his book, he's written about GST, the single market system, fiscal inclusion under the Jan Dhan Yojana, reduced leakages, macroeconomic stability, the ease of doing business, where India has jumped 42 spots, the insolvency and bank code, as a result of which we can bring back people who shred our economic system through wrongdoing, and of course Digital India. He's also spoken about healthcare and education and nutrition in India as part of an all-inclusive look at where he wants India to be. Dr. Kant, my first question to you, this sounds tremendous. This sounds as if, we are on the path of achieving something fantastic. But a lot of people would say that as far as India is concerned, the glass is more half empty than it is half full. Just scratch beneath the surface and there is extreme poverty. Do you believe you are being realistic in these assumptions, in these projections?
So Vishnu, we are, as a country, we are growing at about 7.5% per annum. The challenge is to grow at even higher rates of 9 to 10% over the next 3 decades, year after year, year after year, to be able to lift a very, very young population above the poverty line. Average age of the population is just 29. And this has been done in the past by Japan, by Korea, by China. But I think the important thing for India is to grow with equity. And there is a lot of inequality in the country. And therefore, the book focuses on nutrition, it focuses on health outcomes, it focuses on learning outcomes in a very big way. You need to radically transform your health sector, which is what is being attempted through the Ayushman Bharat scheme. You need to open up your education sector, with a lot of opening up has been done. But my personal view is that a lot of work needs to be done around nutrition. That is really the key to getting the benefit of demographic advantage. But more than that, I think India is becoming a more innovative nation in many, many ways. And two key things I'll point out. One is what we are trying to do through the aspirational district program, because if you look at the map of India, the southern part of India does well, the western part of India does well, but there are about 115 districts, largely in the eastern part of India, which hold India back. So what we've done is we've identified 49 indicators across nutrition, health, education, and skill. And in these 115 districts, resources have flowed in, but these districts haven't done well, and these districts haven't done well because there's been a failure of sheer governance, and there's lack of enthusiasm, there's lack of motivation, there's lack of good governance, and therefore we've created a sense of competition among these districts. We rank them. We have the outcomes, we rank them, we put this out in public domain, we name and shame them. And what we've radically seen in the last 5 to 6 months is a huge improvement in both learning. So you need very focused attention on them.
But let me ask you this. We've both just come from the World Economic Forum in Davos. And you, in what you just mentioned, used the word inequality. The Global Inequality Report, which has just come out about 4 days back, is striking in its statistics on India. And I'm going to just go through a few of these statistics. And these are direct quotes. India's top 10% of the population holds 77.4% of the total national wealth. The contrast is even sharper for the top 1% that holds 51.53% of the national wealth. The bottom 60% of the majority of the population own merely 4.8% of the national wealth, while the wealth of the top 9 billionaires is equivalent to the wealth of the bottom 50% of our population. Bottom line, the rich continue to be rich, perhaps getting richer, while the poor remain at best where they are. How do you confront this?
No, so you're referring to the Oxfam
Yes.
record. I've been through the Oxfam report at length, Vishnu, and the methodology of asset redistribution and through a process of taxation, and saying that growth is all bad leaves a lot to be desired.
No, but that's what their suggestion is. Just these numbers on inequality of wealth.
So I myself say there's inequality, and I feel that country must have growth with equity. And you can't have equity without growth. So you need India to grow at rapid rates of 9 to 10%. I mean, the first basic premise must be India must grow for the next 3 decades. And the second critical issue is that India must focus on health, nutrition, and education. And third is that we must provide skill, because the nature of jobs is changing radically. And therefore, you need to provide skills to the young Indians for another world of tomorrow, and which is going to be a world of robotics, of artificial intelligence. And one of the things that we are doing in partnership with Tarun, who's here, is driving the Atal Tinkering Labs. We've opened about 3,500 of them. We are providing robots, 3D printers. We are providing Internet of Things from class 6 onwards at the school level. So what we found is that Indian students at the school level, even in eastern part of India and the backward areas, are extremely, extremely innovative. You need to break away from the Anglo-Saxon system of education, where you study books, get into the next class.
But again, I disagree with you over there, Pat, and I'll come to the two of you. I'm just sitting over here as guests. But you use the word, you talk about education and about Indian children being extraordinarily bright. We don't doubt that for a moment. But if you look at the quality of education we have, the ACER report by the NGO Pratham. This is the 2017 report. The annual State of Education report, children between the ages of 14 and 18, 25% couldn't read basic text. Half of them struggled with division. 14% couldn't identify the map of India. 68% couldn't point out the state on the map. So what are we chasing? Where is this? I mean, are we being realistic?
So, Vishnu, not just the ACER report. I mean, there's nothing to clap about it. You know, all studies, ACER report, NAS report, all show that learning outcomes are extremely poor in India. And they're extremely poor in India in the populous part of, in UP, in Bihar, including Rajasthan. A lot of focus. Actually, India has achieved a lot in the last few years in terms of being able to provide access of education. And India needs to feel extremely proud of the fact that the 100% access of education has been provided to every single child in India. And now, the entire focus of the government and the entire focus of everyone today is to improve learning outcomes. And I have no doubt in my mind, with the amount of work that is now being done using technology in many ways, including Rajasthan, where a young startup called Imbibe, led by a girl called Aditi, is tracking every student longitudinally, latitudinally, like you track Uber car and you give extra dosage of education to those who are lagging behind. So now the country in the next decade will be completely focused on learning outcomes.
Okay.
And a decade from now, I have a feeling that learning outcomes will radically improve in India.
It has to radically improve or we are in trouble.
Yeah. No, the first, I think the last 2 decades we've focused on access of education, every single
And
place.
now quality needs to be the focus.
Now the learning outcomes have to be the key.
Okay.
And if you look at, and since you quoted ASER, let me tell you, between the last ASER report and this ASER report, ASER itself says that there's been a jump in learning outcomes.
Mr. Iyer, let me ask you this. One of the points that Dr. Kant speaks about extensively, and we'll ask him about this as well, is healthcare, nutrition, also education we referred to. When it comes to healthcare, you deal with Swachh Bharat. The ultimate goal of Swachh Bharat is to ensure that we live healthy lives. But when we are confronted by statistics which say that 1 in 8 people in India die as a result of air pollution related ailments, these are government statistics, right? Then how can we say that we are going to be the country we seek to be in 2030 or 2050? It seems unrealistic.
Sure, Vishnu. Let me just, you're talking about health outcomes. So under the
Just
Swachh Bharat
put the mic,
mission,
closer to your
so
mouth.
the Swachh Bharat mission is perhaps the largest behavior change movement in the world.
Yeah, just hold it like this.
Okay, like this? Okay, thanks. So in terms of health outcomes, this program alone, there's a WHO report which says that by the time the Swachh Bharat mission ends, which is before October 19, more than 300,000 lives of kids below the age of 5 would have been saved. So sanitation itself has got a major impact on health, on economics as well. There's a UNICEF report which says that a household in an ODF village, an open defecation-free village, would save up to 50,000 rupees. So there are different programs which need to converge. We work very closely with the Ministry of Health, with the Ministry of Education, because as you know, access to education has been provided, but there was a challenge in terms of toilets for schools, particularly for girls. So all government schools have toilets. Some of them, there are maintenance issues. But again, you need to converge. And so in sanitation, I think one of the things we have learned is that infrastructure alone is not enough, right?
Okay.
You can build a toilet, you need to use it. So therefore, it's very, very important to nudge people into using toilets. And I think it's that large behavior change program, the Jan Andolan, which has worked very well. And of course, it's led to significant health impact. Air pollution is another matter.
Nainalal Kidwai, we'll come back to the issue of the environment in a bit because I wanted to bring in Dr. Kant as well. But just to you, employment obviously is perhaps the most clear indicator of which way we are heading. Now, the employment rate shot up to 7.4% in December, the highest in 15 months. One of the more shocking statistics which I came across, again in that same Oxfam report, was the gender disparity in employment, where women who do the same job continue to consistently earn less than men. Again, are we generating as many jobs as we should, because again, unemployment numbers, the CMIE report, and this is to you as well, Dr. Kant, 1.9 crore people lost jobs in 2018. The unemployment rate was at 7.4%. Employment generation was always a priority for this government. Have we not achieved?
So two things. One is on gender disparity and gender pay. Hey, this is a global issue. India does not stand out as any different to the rest of the world, where, of course, women should be paid equally to men for the same jobs, and it doesn't happen. So that journey is something which the world has to resolve, and India has to be part of that solution. But jobs. So the model which we have followed in the country all this time is about industry, and yes, more manufacture in India, and Amitabh has been a strong proponent of the Make in India. So all of this generates jobs. But the solutions for India clearly lie in the services sector. The sectors that employ millions is tourism. India, Rajasthan is very much on the tourist map, but India can do a lot more in terms of how we position our tourism, both domestic and global. And this is a big employer. And who better than Amitabh, who built the incredible India and, of course, God's Own Country program in Kerala, to actually touch on this. But I think our focus has to be on the sectors which provide jobs in big numbers, and one which does not get enough mention, and which people like Param know really well, is the delivery of public services. And what I mean here is, if you take sectors like rooftop solar, household and solar going forward, estimates suggest we can have 1 million jobs in the next 5 years from a sector such as this. But what are we doing in terms of skilling people to enter the sector? We need the engineers, and it's very simple engineering, but people who know how to install this. You look at where Param works in terms of whether it's rural sanitation, which India's had a huge success story to talk about, but urban sanitation, which needs to do a lot of catch-up. The public services we can provide and the employment therein is huge. But are we training people to go there? Are these the aspirational jobs? Are we showing people the way? So the gap today between the skills needed, delivery of public services, and employment is, I think, singularly lacking in imagination in the way we are casting the skills of tomorrow. Because at the core of it, we have to bring parents into the picture who aren't just aspiring to have the next master's education happening of their kid who's then going to sit at home, but rather the job that they could and should have, and then train them for it. And I love the idea of the tinkering labs, 3,500 of them at the school level, because if they begin to engender the spirit of entrepreneurship, for the spirit of that young person who will go out and start a company which may run the next cleaning service, or build the toilets of tomorrow, or indeed the household solar systems that need to go up, and the innovations therein, that is the future of India and the jobs of tomorrow.
Dr. Kant, why has our unemployment rate shot up to 7.4%? How would you translate this into jobs going forward?
Vishnu, there are different statistics. India doesn't do a household survey on jobs like the United States does. My view is that in India, the problem is not of unemployment, but of underemployment. Very major problem of underemployment. People get jobs, but they do not get jobs which they are aspiring to get. And therefore, there's very, very severe problem, but you'll get a clear perspective on jobs once the household survey being done by the CSO is completed by 2019 June. Though, the contrarian viewpoints like the EPFO statistics, which has just come out saying 18 million jobs have been created in the last 1 year, but I don't want to get into the numbers game. I think to my mind, the key challenge is really the big wave of next jobs will come from health and education. I mean, there's a huge, huge opportunity of opening out these areas. We are now focusing very strongly on connecting 150,000 primary health centers to district hospitals and digitally connecting them so that specialist care is available at the primary health care level. We have done a huge amount of work now through the Poshan Abhiyan on the nutrition area. And now opening up, with this new health insurance scheme where we are covering 500 million Indians, which is more than the population of USA, Mexico, and Europe put together. So if you're able to insure 500 million Indians through a cashless, paperless, portable scheme, up to an amount of 5 lakh rupees for each Indian, this is a very, very ambitious scheme. These will create, along with opening up of the education sector and focus on learning, improving learning outcomes, and the opening up of the higher education sector will create a vast number of jobs. We must understand that India has 1 doctor as compared to 22 engineers. And therefore, the health sector has been totally controlled, cabined by the Medical Council of India. And doctors I'm working on 115 aspirational districts of India. Doctors are not available for 5 lakhs, 6 lakhs. Young collectors in Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Bihar are struggling to get doctors from different parts of the country, just not available. And therefore, you need to open these sectors up. And once you do that, which is in the process now, as we have done in health, you will see a lot of jobs getting created. And this is the area of growth. The social sectors are the areas of growth. And India just can't grow without equity, let me tell you. These areas will make a huge difference to India.
But when you talk about equity, and this is just coming back to what I'd asked you as well, and this is a question now to Dr. Kant. Ultimately, pollution is such an incredible problem in this country, with the government, with CMIE statistics showing 1 in 8 are now dying as a result of air pollution alone, where 74% or 77% of India's landmass is affected by air pollution. In a country where pollution is not a political issue, how do visionaries like you expect to achieve any results? I can't imagine an area where less is done in the public mind space than in dealing with air pollution. It's not just Swachh Bharat and the schemes, but look at where we are now. Look at it, look at our national capital region. How do we grow unless we live in a place where we can grow?
Yeah. So Vishnu, we are in the midst of the biggest wave of urbanization, right now in India. Actually, in the next 5 decades, India will see close to about 700 million Indians getting into the process of urbanization. As we speak here today, every minute in India, there are 30 Indians moving from rural area to urban areas. And, if you drive down from Delhi to Jaipur, you'll see all unplanned urbanization. Urbanization is happening by default. It's all happening in an unplanned, unscientific manner. And urbanization is inevitable. Cities, in the world, cities account for just 3% of the earth land mass. They create 82% of the GDP, but they account for almost 78% of the CO2 emission. So we need to do planned, scientific, sustainable urbanization. How do you recycle your water? How do you recycle your
But
waste?
if our politicians don't talk about this, then the best of your intentions are lost.
Yeah, but one of the, Vishnu, one of the biggest structural reforms which have been carried out is the push towards renewables. India's commitment towards 175 gigawatt of power and pushing for large-scale bidding for renewables in India is unparalleled. No country has been able to do it and drive down prices to levels which are unbelievable in the world. People across the world wonder at the speed and scale at which we've done our renewables. And the next big wave of disruption which India will be doing will be moving towards batteries and storage and electric vehicles, particularly two-wheelers and three-wheelers. In India, 70% of the vehicles are two-wheelers, and we are pushing for a very major disruption in these
By
areas.
2030, as Nitin Gadkari says, will we be having a large number of electric vehicles on the road, a high percentage?
Our objective is that by 2022, almost 50% of the two-wheelers and almost 75% of the three-wheelers must go electric.
With clean energy.
That's a fantastic objective, and you heard it from him. A few years from now, you can hold him to task, because he intends to do what he says he's going to do, and he's been very consistent in his views as far as that is concerned. Digitization, and I wanted to...
Vishnu, before you move to digitization, I think on pollution, it's worth just stopping to look at the various threads that need to be worked there. And electric vehicles is one of them, yes. But let's not forget that the entire northern belt does have an issue with stubble burning, which has been very much part of it, accounts for maybe 20-25% of the pollution we face. And what we can't ignore is the technologies that we put into agriculture, which we have not mentioned much at all right now on the panel. And what we have to look at is more productive agriculture. We have to review what we're doing there, the jobs that could come from anything from agro-processing to new methods, and solve for pollution in a way that works. And I'm sure many of you know that we have created the issue around stubble burning. We never should have been growing rice in the north. We grow rice, we grow basmati, which is not what is consumed by local people, but is exported. We are water short, so we are exporting water. And what we leave behind is stubble, which we burn and then breathe. The model is all wrong. We need a much better plan which solves for pollution, solves for this export of water, solves for what our farmers are growing, and give them more money in their hands. And I think the problem with a lot of the decision making is it happens in verticals because we create, well, it's what, 7 ministries for water? So we create verticals which don't talk enough to each other. We solve for one problem and create another. Okay. And that's where Niti Aayog's role is critical.
Okay, I'll leave digitization out for the moment because I want to bring in questions. We are running out of time in our talk. But, since you did mention agriculture, Dr. Kant, do you believe agrarian distress is the single largest problem we face in our economy right now?
Yeah. So Vishnu, I'll come to the agrarian distress in a wee bit. There's a bit about pollution, and I'm making this point because India is doing these 100 smart cities. But we Indians, we believe in keeping a house clean, but we litter our cities, our urban areas, are just outside your house. You go where I stay, just outside our houses, all garbage and filth. And you expect the government to keep it clean, and we Indians go around littering all over? You can't have 100 smart cities without smart people. I mean, people must take ownership. You don't expect the government to clean up everything. People expect the government to clean up, and we go around littering everywhere. That's not feasible. I mean, people must take ownership of this. Without that, India will never be a clean place.
Agrarian distress?
Yeah. So, on the issue of agrarian distress, there's definitely a huge concern, and I think the country needs to focus on. You see, when the first Green Revolution happened, there was a huge stress on technology. There was a huge focus on backward-forward linkages, and to my mind, India needs a second Green Revolution with tremendous focus on new innovative technology, on cold storages, we need to bring in seed and fertilizer for our farmers based on real-time condition of weather and soil.
And water efficiency.
And water efficiency, which will hold the key. And I think essentially agriculture will work if the markets work.
Minimum support price is the key issue.
So
will our farmers be supported?
So markets work. Part of the reason is that we've constrained our lands with a vast number of rules, regulations. We've constrained our markets with Essential Commodities Acts. We've constrained our inability to do large-scale production by a huge amount of controls on land. You need to break them open to allow markets to function.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, show of hands, please, for questions. The gentleman over there, you were first, so I'll give you the first question as well. The gentleman who's standing up over there. No, over there. Hard luck. I'll try.
Hi. Well, I believe in the growth of India. India is going spaces. But in doing so, and because I work a lot with the unorganized sector, a sector which is essentially core to the Indian income generation. This sector is highly vulnerable in terms of the fact that, yes, they made good money because of the 10 years growth that we've seen.
So, sir,
but
your question.
But the question is, how do we protect this sector? Because the moment they face one risk or the other shock, they tend to dissipate because they're being funded heavily through a debt structure. Where is
Okay.
the equity in this?
Okay, Dr. Kant.
No, there's been a huge amount of focus on the unorganized sector in recent times. A large number of measures have been taken, and large number of measures are recently been. Actually, one sector which is in India done very well in the last 4 years is the unorganized sector. Now, I think don't keep asking for relief sector by sector by sector. That's very unfair. Ask for the growth of India. The entire India must grow. India needs to grow at 9 to 10%. I can't say a formal sector will grow, unorganized sector will grow, doctors will grow. India needs to grow, and that requires huge amount of structural reforms across the board. And India needs to become very easy and simple for everybody to create wealth, including the unorganized sector.
But it is a sector today that is being starved of finance. It is a sector that is a big employer and one which we absolutely need to look at the structure and support that needs to come in order to ensure India's growth. It's key to India's growth.
Okay, the young woman over there, yes. If you can just ask questions, everybody, not comments, so that we can get an answer.
Hi, my name is Deepthi. I work in the edtech sector, and we were speaking about education. We didn't really linger much on that. So my question is that, there are two things. We spoke about learning outcomes. Now, I know that curriculums are, being reformed with 21st century skills, etc. But what are the measurable parameters that are being set for, that would be common across India, where we can measure the learning outcomes? So how are we going to measure it? And secondly, although we bring a lot of reform in terms of adult tinkering labs, etc., the final, people on ground are the teachers. And unless the teachers are trained to do what needs to be done, we can't take this forward. So what are we doing for that?
Teacher training, and how do you quantify a learning outcome?
Can we take a couple of questions so that we can answer to all of them, or do you want one by one?
Let's try one.
Okay, so I think that's a very, very important point that you've made. One is that, if you look at the 115 aspirational districts of India, one of the main reasons why these districts have remained backwards, we don't call them backwards, we call them aspirational. But one of the main reasons why educationally they have done extremely poorly is the lack of teachers. There's just no teachers available. And it's very, very tough to find teachers going to these districts. Now, though the young collectors there have been trying very hard, it's very difficult to get specialized teachers also, maths, physics, etc. And secondly, in a school of 1,000 children, there are just about 3 teachers. Number 2, I think these teachers have just not been trained. So the diet system of training teachers has just not worked at all in several states, particularly the eastern part of India. There's just been no training of teacher. Now, there have been some very interesting experiments recently tried out. One by the district collector of Banka, along with the IIT Delhi, in terms of training through using technology or through a mobile app. And there, the improvement has been fairly sharp. It's shown a 30% improvement in learning outcomes because of in the number of schools they've done. They've covered about 100 odd schools. Number 2 is that my personal belief is that given the constraints today, you need a huge focus on technology to improve learning outcomes. And this has been shown in several areas. In Rajasthan, one girl who runs a startup called Hello English has taught 9 million Indians how to speak English. There's another girl, Imbibe, who's tracking children, and Rajasthan has shown a big jump in learning outcomes. Similarly, in Madhya Pradesh, the government has focused very strongly on districts which had remained behind. Now, on learning outcomes, there are very defined parameters under ASA. The Ministry of Education does not agree with the survey of ASA because it's taken at household levels and not in schools. I am a great believer on third-party assessment. Unlike the Ministry of Education, my belief is that we should always go for third-party assessment, even if it doesn't work to our advantage. But learning outcomes there are very clearly defined. Performance against English, performance against your mother tongue, performance on maths, performance at different levels, very clearly defined. So if you, just outside, after this session, I can take you through this whole learning lesson on learning outcomes, but they're fairly clearly defined on that.
Okay.
But what I feel is that my own experience shows that if you are able to monitor that very clearly, if you can measure that very clearly, learning outcomes show a sharp improvement in area where there's focused attention on improvement in education outcomes.
Okay. Yes, the gentleman over there in the turban. Yeah, go ahead. Actually, behind. You're both in turbans, but I was pointing to him.
So I had two questions. For the first one, if we are talking about radically evolving requirements.
Just one question, everybody.
Okay.
One question.
All right. So
You
if
have
we are
5 minutes left. Yes.
Given that we are talking about radically evolving requirements from new employees, the solar sector coming up, and so on and so forth, is tangible skill development even the right way forward, or should we take a step back and say more abstract problem-solving skill development and more critical thinking skill development is the more scalable way forward?
That's an interesting question. Why don't you take that question? So, yeah.
Yeah. No, look, it's a good point, and I think that you got to look at it both ways. So in my
Just
own
hold the
sector,
mic like this.
Sorry?
Just point it to your, yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
like that.
this, yeah.
I need that's some skill development for me, I think.
No, it's coming, it's coming. Don't change the mic.
Yeah. So for example, you're talking of should you be specific or should you be more into problem solving? I think you got to do both. In my sector, in India, you've got to look at it at scale. And that's really important in our country. So for example, in my program, the biggest challenge we faced was how do you get 600 million people out of the habit of open defecation, right? Now, what are the skills involved here? We had to adapt our own skills in changing behavior. So that's our own people. And then you got to get people on the ground to change their behavior. So we started deploying what we call Swachhagrahis. These are grassroots level motivators who are trained in community approaches to sanitation. So we had to train them and retrain them. We are using technology now, using mobile academies. They went out to communities. So if we didn't give them specific training, they wouldn't have been able to go to communities and persuade them and convince them why is open defecation bad for health, etc., etc. So that needed a specific skill. Masons are required. Talk of women empowerment today in Jharkhand, they have Rani Mistris, which are women masons. So you need to skill at a technical level, but you also need to bring about problem-solving abilities. So we had young, Amitabh keeps talking about demographic dividend. So we got the support of the Tata Trust. We placed 500 young professionals in every district in India. They went about and they were the problem solvers. So they had more general problem solving, creative, innovative skills, and they worked very well with the technical thing. So I think you need a balance of both.
Okay. Which side have I not picked from? Oh, from the front. That's true, no? Okay,
This is
fine.
the last question, I'm afraid. Last minute.
Hi, I thank the panel to make things very optimistic about India because on the ground it's pessimistic. This was reflected by Fareed Zakaria yesterday at the Davos, where he said that India's growth is muddled. It has not grown as per expectations. My question is specific to the things he raised in his talk yesterday, where he talks about that's due to the inadequacies of the government and the lack of strategy. Can you say one thing where the government...
Does the government lack strategy in growth?
No,
and inadequacies of the government?
Inadequacies.
Yeah, so I think the kind of structural reforms India has seen, I don't think any other country has seen in the last few years. The goods and services tax, one tax across the country. I mean, it's like one tax across Europe. It would have taken years and years. We've done this. We've managed to do this. I mean, the insolvency and bankruptcy code coming into India, you know, earlier you could take loan from banks and not pay and get away with it. You have a classic case of SR losing both its oil company and the steel company simply because of the insolvency and bankruptcy code, which truly, once it becomes fully operational, will end crony capitalism in India, to my mind. We brought in RERA, which is again a great middle class people like me paid for houses and couldn't get the houses. So RERA will ensure that there's a lot of discipline in the builders of India. And these are very, very major structural reforms which are carried out in India. India's challenges are humongous. You know, I mean, 1.3 billion population, challenges of 1 in 2 women being anemic, huge challenges. But I think we need to be don't get carried away by what Fareed Zakaria talks on CNN. We should have a better understanding as Indians here that people like Param Iyer are transforming the landscape of sanitation and drinking water in India. So I think I'm extremely, and absolutely all of us Indians must have a sense of pride and sense of conviction and a sense of optimism. Don't get carried away by CNN. I'm absolutely clear in my mind, you know.
Yeah. So look, I have to come in here as
Last
the
two
sole non-government person on this panel to say that I wish we had more officers like the two that we have here. Amitabh, you've heard, and Param I work very closely with in sanitation, and a remarkable example of someone who left the civil service, worked in the World Bank in water and sanitation, and was pulled back by this government to be exactly in the spaces he understands as an IS officer to implement sanitation in rural India, which he has done extremely well. Inadequacies, of course there are. We need more empowered individuals like these two. We need a civil service that works, which is not hampered by the way they are being treated today in terms of corruption and being impaled or indeed being FIR'd to a level where decision-making has stopped.
Okay, Bab, I'm interrupting because I'm going to get clobbered on my head very soon. Just 30 seconds, sir. I want you to have the last word on this.
Yeah, you know, you spoke about
And then I'll
political
wrap up.
will, Vishnu, about air pollution. I have to say, and you know, this is, I'm saying it very sincerely, you know, it took a big risk when the Prime Minister announced Swachh Bharat, and it's a public good, right? Essentially, we are trying to sell a product which no one really wants. And so, to make an announcement and to back it with public funding, that took a lot of guts. And you know, everyone said, hey, this is impossible. So I'm saying there is political will, and without that, we wouldn't have made half the success which we have. So I think that the scale at which we operate, you know, to stick your neck out, to make a public statement, and then to back that up. We had a conference recently of 55 sanitation ministers around the world, and all of them said, hey, I can't convince my finance minister to put money into sanitation. It's got the maximum return on public health, but my finance minister is not giving me the funds. So here we learned the 4 Ps: political will, public funding, partnerships, and people's participation.
Sure.
And Vishnu,
Yeah.
what Param has done and what the sanitation program has achieved will have a huge spin-off in both nutrition, health, and education.
Absolutely. Well, we're completely out of time on this session. I think you've got an idea of what Amitabh Kant is all about. He will not take no for an answer, and he expects to achieve a lot of what he said, all of what he has said. But I think the point that he made, which struck a chord most with me, was that this is not just about government, it's not just about government policy, it's about people willing to be a part of that process, and which means that all of us are responsible for sanitation, for education, for healthcare. And I think being positive is what the big message over here is, that despite the problems, there is still hope. Thank you all very much for being with us this afternoon. There you go.
Thank you so much. What a fascinating discussion. What a wonderful panel. We would ask Amitabh Kant and Naina Lalkiwai. We have books for you to sign at the author's signing desk, if you don't mind. And we have lots of people wanting to ask questions and discussions, but we would please ask that you ask the panelists as we walk them up out of the venue, because we have a next session starting very soon. Big round of applause for our wonderful panelists. Thank you so much for joining us.